You're listening to the Screaming Pods Network.
Them dying or getting sick?
That's scary. Sudden infant death syndrome. Have you heard of that? Do you know what that is?
Yes, I know what that is. I think
that's
everybody
scary.
knows what it is. Yes, it's scary.
You could be holding someone else's child and just... I think Mike Birbiglia had a bit about that.
Well, that's not something I'd like to joke about. But I think kids and their either imaginations or just twisted personalities, if they happen to be an early age psychopath, is the scariest thing about children.
I'd have to agree with that. I think as you grow older, your imagination is sort of weathered by, life, etc. I won't go into it.
Not the
and
place nor
expose my
time.
own psychological issues. Yeah, but in when we see, we can't kind of comprehend that sort of activity in an imagination inside of a human being, and it kind of can throw your creepy sirens to go off.
Well, it's like, I remember having imaginary friends as a child.
Yeah, oh yeah, me too. It was innocent.
But there's also a part of me that's like, okay, do these kids actually see and communicate with beings that I can't see? That's what I'm saying.
Because you're older now, your rational mind has to realize the idea that there either actually is somebody there we cannot see, or the child is talking to nobody, which would make the child insane, and there can't be something wrong with my child. Why are there ghosts in my house?
All great points. But before we jump into our stories tonight, we have a couple of really exciting announcements to share about the show.
I think one super exciting announcement. Big thank you to Sean DeRager for asking us to be a part of his big podcast family, the Screaming Pods Network. Sean is the co-host and creator of the Screamcast podcast, which celebrates all things retro, cult, and fringe in horror.
And he recently launched his new show, Xenopod, from the year 5000, where once a month Sean discusses a science fiction film with a special guest host. You can check his shows out and a bunch of other crazy great podcasts at www.screamingpods.com.
Yeah, and if the network is the reason you're hearing us right now, thank you for joining us. I say that word really weird, so you got to get used to that. To give you a little background on the show, we're a storytelling podcast focusing on anything weird, spooky, classic urban legends, just stories you tell around the campfire.
Yeah, and we believe that the scariest stories are the ones that we have experienced ourselves. So we encourage listeners to share their own terrifying tales with us and the show by submitting stories to us at our website, www.atthefire.com/submit.
This episode, we have one of our favorite At the Fire storytellers joining us. You'll remember her from her infamous debut on Julie and Catherine's Haunted Adventure. She's back tonight to share with us a few stories about her creepy encounters with children, starting with an experience she had with her younger brother.
This was when we lived in Troy, and I am 10 years older than him. So at the time, he was, I want to say like 5 or 6. Like, he was little. He would start having these like night terrors, and they honestly came out of nowhere. Like, he was a sound sleeper prior to, never had any problems. You had like a hard time waking him up. But he started having these night terrors where all of a sudden you would hear like just blood curdling, like screaming coming from him. And my mom and I, because I feel like we were the only ones that would wake up to it, would always like go running in there and like, what the heck is happening? And he would just be like sitting like dead straight up in his bed, but like his eyes are still closed and he's screaming. And like we're trying to like wake him up, like shake him, like Colin, like wake up. And he has he doesn't wake up. And then all of a sudden he kind of like falls like limp and then is like not, I don't know, very disoriented and just not with it. They weren't like super frequent, but I would say maybe like twice a month or so for a while, maybe a little bit more than that. But this one time it was so bad. Again, we hear the blood curdling like scream, and my mom and I like get out of our beds, we go running into his bedroom and he's not in his bedroom. And we were like, what the fuck? So we go running down the stairs, like, where is this child? And he is in the downstairs of our house. And there was kind of like a shelf cabinet thing in our foyer that's, usually pushed up against the wall. That was moved away from the wall by about a foot. Our rug was all disheveled. And he is standing in the hallway, so maybe like 6 feet away, screaming, just standing there screaming, and he has a huge knot on his head. And so again, we're like, Colin, wake up. Like my mom's holding him, he's screaming, he's crying. And then she finally kind of like wakes him up and he like kind of like passes out in her arms. And he has zero recollection of these every time. Like he has no idea what happened, what we're talking about. He's never been known to sleepwalk or anything like that. So this was all like super new. Him being a 5 or 6 year old, there's no fucking way he could have moved that away from the wall by himself. Like it's impossible. It's way too heavy. He was 5 or 6 years old. Like he was, just past toddler stage. Like he was small, and he was a small kid growing up too. So there's absolutely no way he could have done it. It's impossible, especially the way it was moved and angled. Like no way. Like I have goosebumps like right now, like retelling it, because it was just so like creepy and off. I don't know. It was just, you don't want to say what you think it was, but at the same time, what else could that have been? You know what I mean? Like it was one of those experiences that you're like, this is so abnormal, and what, I don't know. But it's also strange because we'd been living there for at least 10 years, and my sister and I never had any experiences like that. So, not sure.
So I know what I think happened here, and my mind's always quickly jumping to a paranormal explanation. Again, try to rationalize everything. But the fact that this child moved this big, heavy piece of furniture, and I've been in the house, I know exactly which bookshelf she's talking about in the story. A 5-year-old couldn't move it, and her brother is a small kid.
Yeah, so my rational mind said there had to have been somebody else there. There's somebody that's been terrorizing this kid, but there's no way. Like, that house is always filled with the family. He's a super young kid. Like, he's not doing a lot of stuff on his own. Why move the piece of furniture in the first place? It's not like there's something behind it that you need to get to. That's really odd.
Right, so I'm thinking maybe a paranormal force wanted to harm him. Maybe the force was moving the bookshelf closer to him, or wobbling it, or something. It's
like luring him into the corner and trying to crush him into it.
Right. It's unsettling knowing that, well, everybody's asleep at night. Here's this young boy wandering the house, and furniture is being moved around, big, heavy, body-crushing furniture.
And then it just happened so suddenly. The kid was fine until one night this began.
Well, that's not the only type of interaction cats have with children. Cat gets to work with children every day because Cat is a super phenomenal teacher, but she's had her fair share of creepy encounters at work.
I am a teacher and I've been teaching for a couple years now. So I've had my fair share of kiddos and definitely some different experiences with each one. This actually happened this year. We had a student who kind of came to us temporarily, so it wasn't for a long period of time. He came to us and, first day, great, no problems. Came second day, he started having some kind of like, I would say borderline like creepy behaviors, but we're kind of like, oh, he's little, he's in second grade. He's probably just mimicking things, right? He starts having more, I guess, aggressive, creepy behaviors where he's like starting to get physical. And one of his behaviors was like scratching his face. And so he would literally just like scratch the shit out of his face and leave like giant like red marks all down his face, and like he wouldn't stop. So that's a problem. Other times we would have to go and we have like a separate room that like a teacher will monitor a student one-on-one when they've had like an episode or something. So we have a teacher in there with him, and he is sitting in the corner facing the wall and is just sitting there, and he goes, "Alexa, turn the lights on," like just talking to himself. So like mimicking the Alexa Amazon thing, but to himself, like complete disregard for anybody else there. This is also a time where Pennywise was a big thing with it, and he had the scariest impersonation of this that I think I've ever seen in my entire life. He would get that like shit-eating grin, but stare at you like I will suck out your soul, and would just like mock like voices. And anytime you saw him, he was either walking around talking to himself, mumbling to himself. It was never just, he had a hard time like interacting with someone, or when you try to talk to him, he would like look at you. And then when we parted ways and he, was moved to his holding school, or the school that he was supposed to be at, he is emitting like the same behaviors there, but I guess like even worse, where like the physicalities got even worse with him. And he's in second grade, and a lot of the things that he is portraying are much older and more severe than that of any second grader that should. So not really sure what he's up to nowadays, but he definitely had some bad juju, that's for sure.
That's one of the most terrifying things about being a teacher. Just the random chance of having a student like that. Having a potential psychopath. It's going to happen eventually if you stick around long enough.
Luckily, her school has a great social worker that interacts with the students regularly. So when, I can only imagine this happens a handful of times for every teacher, that they see some type of behavior that could potentially cause a harmful environment for the other students. And what do you do? Just be a stander by, or do you take action?
Exactly, and I have to say, like, I hope having a social worker at the school is not an uncommon thing. Like, I hope more schools do that, because, yeah, it would be difficult to identify, diagnose, and, I don't know, solve for those sorts of things.
But one other environment where you I imagine have A lot of opportunities to have a creepy kid experience would be at a daycare.
Oh, yeah.
One Redditor, Madeline, wrote a story about growing up with a parent who ran a daycare, and there was a very unusual child that attended. So during most of my life, my mother ran a daycare. One of the kids was named Dylan, and Dylan was really smart and somewhat rebellious, but not one of those jerk kids, you know? We all liked him, but there was something about him. He was always a bit off. And one day, Dylan was sitting at the kitchen table eating his snacks. The other kids were done, so it was just him and my mom. He had some carrots left, but his cup was empty. My mom asked if he wanted some more juice. Now, keep in mind, he was around the age of 7 when this happened. I just happened to have been home visiting, making a sandwich nearby, when I heard his response.
Well, miss, I'd prefer some whiskey if you wouldn't mind obliging me.
What? Whiskey? No.
Begging your pardon, miss, but it's been a long day. I'm going to turn in soon, and I'm not here to cause any trouble. I've heard you have whiskey, and I'm more than happy to pay for it. I'm having a good week.
And this made no sense. This was a little kid. And our family certainly had no whiskey in the house because, we were teetotalers ourselves. We knew that his parents rarely let him watch TV, let alone, I'm sure, watch any old-timey westerns. But here he was, accent and all. I mean, he kind of sounded like Jeff Bridges in True Grit. My mom pushed back. No, Dylan, no whiskey for you. Orange juice. She set down a sippy cup, and she filled it with juice.
Ma'am, that's just not going to cut it. I came all the way down from Wyoming, and by tarnation, I'm a man who wants some whiskey. If you can't provide it, then I'll find someone who can.
He stood up and he made for the door, and he actually got it open. And then my mom grabbed him. Presto, he was back to normal. Nothing he did during that time was recognizably him. I mean, his body language was different, his voice was way lower, and he acted too natural with this personality that just wasn't him. It happened a few times after that, and the next time it happened, my mom asked him who he was, and he gave a name that was something along the lines of Thomas Jeremy Armstrong. She got really into it and started asking about his life. He was apparently a lumber prospector and trader who lived his later years somewhere north of Sacramento, and we were in Washington State. He also shared that he had a wife who died from a fever. This kid was in first grade. He wasn't a lumber prospector, he never lived near Sacramento, and he wasn't Thomas Jeremy Armstrong. My mom kept trying to get more details out of him, so she asked him when his birthday was.
December 14th, 1856. It was a Sunday.
Sure enough, it was a fucking Sunday.
Well, tarnation, who was that silky voiced fella you got on that recording there?
I think we hired somebody out from somewhere else.
Probably a real handsome fellow.
Super sexy. So, do you think that this kid learned that behavior subliminally? Do you think
Yeah, he had to have picked it
outside
up somewhere. Come on.
Do you think? I mean, kids are more aware of their surroundings than I think we give them credit for being.
Yeah, impressionable for sure. And I think any kid who catches a glimpse of a Western or a John Wayne film, cowboys and Indians, if you want to call it that. Every movie I saw as a child, I was instantly acting it out immediately after it ended. I mean, come on.
And I don't know how familiar you are with all the awesome little kids that are always on the Ellen show, but my
Oh, I love Ellen.
Who us love Ellen. Ellen DeGeneres is amazing. But my mind immediately goes to this cute little redheaded kid she has on all the time named Noah, who just has, I feel like he's a smart little kid who could easily imitate an accent and a personality.
I'll take your word for it on Noah, but yeah, I agree. It is, kids love to play make-believe and all that, and a case of make-believe might be what we have here.
Which is, on the safer side of a creepy kid encounter. At least, the kid who's a lumber prospector was either doing it all in good fun or, wasn't letting an old spirit take over his body intentionally. I think the scariest kids act with evil intent. They're the ones that know exactly what they're doing, and we often just don't know why.
When I was in 6th grade, there was a once-a-week group therapy session with a class of developmentally delayed students that involved them doing some crafts activity, playing with Legos, or watching a movie, all as a group. Any of the students could sign up for it, and I signed up pretty instantly. Why not? It was a guaranteed escape from history class once a week. One of my best friends at the time had the exact same idea, and it basically turned into a second lunch period for us. The whole thing was overseen by a therapist named Bruce, and it was generally pretty laid back. Bruce was an overweight, 50-something bald guy with the demeanor and general appearance of Santa Claus. He ran most of the school's extracurriculars and was pretty much universally liked. The other important player in this story is a kid who I'll call Carl. You know the stereotype of psychopaths being obsessed with animal torture as a kid? This was dead on Carl. He'd always tell these long, excited stories during group about how much fun he had last week, tearing the leg off of a squirrel he caught in his live trap, and stuff like that. Most of us just sort of ignored him. It was kind of assumed that he was all talk and just making up gross stuff to get attention. So one week, we were playing with Play-Doh. The general drive was to get us to build things and tell stories about them. Most people just built dinosaurs or threw clay at each other. Carl, for whatever reason, had a huge flat square slab laid out and was building 4 large pillars on the corners. He eventually put a roof on it, which wouldn't stay on due to the lack of interior support. We would always leave a few minutes early as the group ran right into the start of the next period, and we needed time to get to class. So we walked out while Bruce and the remaining kids were smashing Play-Doh, giggling, and throwing chunks of dough back into the bin. I got to my next class, and my teacher wasn't there. Nobody knew what was going on. About 10 minutes later, she finally showed up, looking frazzled, and wouldn't give us any information other than something happened that needed staff attention. Being 6th graders, we went nuts with speculation. So a few hours later, I ran into the friend from group. He was jumpy and looked like he'd been traumatized. He wouldn't tell me what was going on other than mentioning that group therapy was canceled indefinitely. I kept prying for information and eventually got the story out of him. During the cleanup, the Play-Doh had to be compacted back into its tub. This involved lots of smashing the Play-Doh sculptures, a bit that the developmentally delayed kids greatly enjoyed, to the point where they tried to smash other people's stuff. Carl's house was one of the last things to go. He smashed down 2 columns, let one of the other kids smash another, and finally dared Bruce to smash the last one, really hard. The last one had a pocket knife in it. I never saw Bruce or Carl ever again. That's what I'm talking about. You get one bad egg, and I bet that Bruce guy doesn't work with children anymore.
No, and it sounded like he was really great at his job, too. But, no, you get a Carl in there.
But really, no matter how scary kids may be to you, they're just kind of a part of life. They're everywhere you go.
So you're always taking a chance and a risk when you're interacting with any child.
You're always in danger, Watch your back. No, really, but if you can relate to these stories, if you can sympathize, if you have a similar tale that you could share, let us know.
Go ahead, head over to our website. Let us know what your stories are.
You can submit your story at our website, atthefire.com. You could just email us. It's admin@atthefire.com.
Oh, and while you're on the webpage, don't forget, this month we have a survey on our listener page.
Oh, yeah.
It's a short survey. Just help us learn a little more about where we should be concentrating our marketing efforts and what we can be doing better as a show for you, the listener. So take the short survey, and you could win a $50 Amazon gift card along with some other super spooky swag.
Yeah, we really do value your opinions. $50 at stake. Let us know what you think.
And with that, we'll leave you our first official episode as part of the Screaming Pods family.
Woo woo.
And we hope to see you the next time at the fire.
As always, my name is Ben.
And this is Jill.
Thanks again for being with us.
Stay spooky.
Stay sexy.
You're listening to the Screaming Pods Network.